Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be talking to you about GitHub. Well, what is GitHub? GitHub is a hosting platform for version control and collaboration between developers. On GitHub you can find many open source projects, and it is also a cloud-based solution for you to store your code. So how do you get started with Git and make a repository? Well, once you've logged in, you go over to the repositories tab and go to this green new button. And the repository name, I'm going to call it CSCI. You just choose a repository name that makes sense to you, give it an option or description, and then adjust its visibility modifiers. So public, anyone on the internet can see this, and private, choose who can see and commit to this repository. For classes at UGA, I recommend using the private, as if it is public, anyone can see it, and if people, say, in years down the line want to take your code, you could get strike for academic honesty at UGA. So make it private, and then for classes like this where you can collaborate, you can change who can have access to this repository. I'm going to skip the initialize the repository, so once you find a name, description, and visibility, click create repository. And once you're here, you'll see all this scary information. We're gonna ignore that for a second and say get started by creating a new file. The name of this new file, I'm gonna call it readme.md and give it a description. Once you've done that, scroll all the way down and commit it. You guys might be familiar with this, so I'm gonna say, and this text will show up as my commit message. As we see here, created readme. So now that we have this file, something you guys might be doing in class is sharing this with other people in your group. So you'll go to settings, go to manage access, and invite a collaborator. To access this page, it might have you relog into GitHub just so it knows it's you. But when you invite a collaborator, you can search by username, full name, or email. And when you do this, send an invite to the collaborator, and then they'll be able to see it. But now that we have a repository set up, we'll need to go to the Odin server. And to go to the Odin server, we have to SSH onto the server. And once we're here, we can go back to the website, go to code, and see this big code button. It'll have different clone options, HTTPS, SSH, and GitHub CLI. I'm going to just use the HTTPS version, so I'm going to copy this, go back to the Odin server, and say the command git clone, and then that link, and click enter. Enter my username and password. And once you've done that, it'll give you some messages, and if I type ls, as we can see that repository here. So now that we have that repository, what can we do with it? Well, the repository looks kind of like this. On our computer, we're doing our code. We'll say have our computer. And on our computer, we'll have all of our code, our nice code. I'm just gonna write brackets. And once we have this code, we're kind of done with it. What we want to do is add it to something called the stage. And the stage is kind of saying, hey, we're done editing this, we're pushing it off to the side for now. And to do that, we're going to use a command called add. So once we're finally done with all of our code, we've added all of it to the stage, we're then going to commit it. And committing it, I like to reference as kind of like you're turning your assignment into your teacher. You're done with it, you're good. Yeah, so we're putting it in this folder to give to our teacher. We're saying, hey, this is our finalized work. Once it's committed, it's still on our computer, but it's kind of like away from us. So once we've committed it with our message, we can run another command that's push. And what pushing does is it's still on our computer at this point, but once we push it, we actually push it to the GitHub cloud server. So then all of our code that was once on our computer is now synced with the GitHub cloud server, which then our group members will be able to access it. And as I demonstrated when we are pulling our repository, to get repositories from GitHub, we can do something called clone. So these are kind of the stages of doing a git commit. You have to add it to the stage, commit it, and then push it in order to get on the cloud. And to get anything down from GitHub, you have to clone it. So what's the purpose of using this, and how does it relate to version control? Well, in a project, you might have many files. Say I have file A, file B, and file C. And say I'm working in a group of, say, 3 people. I have group member 1 working on A, group member 2 working on B, group member 3 working on file C. So in any project, say you're working on like a Word document in Microsoft Word. As you're typing an essay, for example, there are many times where you're going to want to save that essay, so that if, say, you do Control A and then backspace, which will delete all of your text, you can just go back to your previous save. GitHub works in a similar fashion. In version A, say I'm up to like checkpoint 1 in my file, and I want to save it. I can commit it and push it, and then I kind of have a save checkpoint. Say I make one more change down the line, I add another paragraph maybe. In coding, you could add another method, for example. Then I save it again. I have version 2. Now my group member B, say he only had one version of his file. He just made one version, he didn't have much to write, and he's just done there. Group member C though, he had the most part to do in the project, so he had a couple versions where he saved as he was going through 3 different methods that he had to write. He saved in between each one. So at this point, file A has 2 versions, file B has 1 version, file C has 3 versions. You can do something called merging, where if we are working on all these separately, we could then merge this down into an updated file A, B, and C. And this will be your current repository, the one that you're currently working on. So if you've synced all these together, all these files A, B, and C will be updated with group member 1, 2, and 3's changes. So this is kind of the purpose of using GitHub. So we have these save checkpoints as we're working on our code, and at any time, say you want to go back and view person A's first save checkpoint, we can. We can use git checkout, and we can go back in time with these versions. Similarly, how in Google Docs you can go back to the history of a file and look at how that file looked at that point in time. GitHub allows you to do the same thing. So taking a look at my repository, as you can see, I am now inside of that working directory. I have my README file. If I display it, it just has GitHub Demo in it. Okay, so now that I have one file, say I want to add another file. So in this file, test.txt, I'm going to call it, I'm going to give it the message first commit and save that. And so now I have a file called test.txt. The steps we was going through earlier, we have to add it to the stage. And then if we can see, we now have this that says changes to be committed, new file. If we had not added it, it would not have committed it when we try and run the commit command. So now that we've committed it, or now that we've added it, and we're ready to commit it, give it to our teacher, as I was saying earlier, we could say, and give it a message. I'm just gonna say first commit. And as you can see here, one file changed, one insertion, creating mode test.txt. So now if we look at the log of Git, we can see that we have this ID for it and our message, first commit. So now I'm going to make a couple more changes to our file. We can say, hello, this is going to be my second commit. Save that, do the same process. As we can see here, we have to add that file back. So git add test.txt and git commit second commit. Now if we look back at our log again, we now have second commit, which is great. So now say we had someone else working on a different file. Say we wanted to add another file to a program, but we wanted this to be a different person, not myself. We could do something called branching, which is, I was demonstrating earlier with file A, B, and C. We can create different branches to work on those files separately. So if I type git branch B1, now I have two branches, main and B1. So this relates to kind of like my people working on the different files. So then I have to go into branch B1. And the command for that is git checkout B1. Now it says switch branch into B1. So now if I type git branch, as you can see the asterisk is by B1, I'm now in B1. So inside of this branch, I still have the readme and text file, but I don't want to touch those files so I don't get any merge errors later on. I want to work on a different file, which I'm just going to call diff.txt. And inside of it, I'm just going to say this is a second file. Save that, add it, commit it, and if we look at the log, we can see we made a different file. But this looks a little different now. Head now says B1. Previously, I believe it was saying we were pointing to main, but that's because we're on this different branch. So, what does this look like now? We have two different files, or actually three. We have the readme, we have the test.txt, and we have diff.txt. So if you go back into the main branch, as you can see, we don't actually have that diff.txt file. That's because this was made on a different branch of the program. So we have these two files on this branch, we have another file on the different branch. So what happens if we want to, say, merge those two branches together? I want to combine all of our work together. We can run this command. And as you can see, now we have diff.txt on our main branch. As you can see, we're on our main branch. If we type cat diff.txt, as you can see, we have this second file. So this is how you and, say, a group mate can work on a project, be working on different files, test them on your own, and then combine them all together at the end. And if you want to learn more about Git version control, there's this tutorial. This tutorial is actually from CSCI 1302. It's a tutorial they provided us for external reference. Have a look through it. It goes over some more complex topics of Git, but it also breaks down the theory of it again. So, hope this helped. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Feel free to reference this version control document, and good luck on your projects.